I'm just here early, so I hope that there wasn't going to be a dramatic introduction or anything like that. But hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Jeremy Crawford, everyone. Go Slavicsek.
So good to see you all.
Stand fruit. Oh yes, and we gotta. We're supposed to be very sure that we're aiming at our mic.
Hello, hello.
So Jeremy, make sure you're sort of pointed right at the microphone. It's very directional.
Hello. Hi.
The doors are closing now. They will be sealed.
Goodbye forever, world. This is Eberron 20-year celebration. If you were hoping to get into Shut Up and Sit Down, that's next door. They started half an hour ago. Sorry, guys. There we go. Let's introduce ourselves. My name is Rebecca Gray. I will be your moderator this morning. I am the author of Textiles of Eberron, Issue 1, Five Nations. Ooh. I'm also the co-host and creator of Eberron, a Chronicle of Echoes. What does radio sound like in Eberron? And that's pretty much it for me. Keith, why don't you introduce yourself?
So I am Keith Baker. In addition to my involvement with Eberron, I am the co-owner of Twogether Studios, and I have made games like Gloom and Illimat and Phoenix Dawn Command. And I just feel incredibly lucky to be here, to have had the opportunity to have this world come to life. And yeah, and that's all because of...
Hi, I'm Bill Slavicsek. I've done a lot of stuff. Other than Eberron, I'm known for Star Wars, I'm known for D&D, Council of Worms, D20 Modern, D20 Star Wars.
Council of Worms, D20 Modern.
Yeah, stuff like that. And currently I am the narrative director for Elder Scrolls Online.
Jeremy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremy Crawford. I'm the game director of Dungeons & Dragons. And over the last, my goodness, 17 years, I have worked on many, many D&D books. But my very first D&D book to work on at Wizards of the Coast was an Eberron book. In fact, it was the last Eberron book and the last book entirely of 3rd edition, The City of Stormreach. And then I had the delight of co-leading the design of Eberron Rising from the Last War with Keith and James Wyatt.
Woo!
And last but certainly not least, Imogen, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Imogen Gingell. I'm a writer and designer. You may know some of what I've done from working with Keith over the last few years on Chronicles of Eberron and Frontiers of Eberron Quickstone. I've also done some work for the Cosmere RPG and MCDM over the last few years. Oh, and I was a co-host of Manifest Zone, the podcast, when we were doing that as well.
Woo!
So we're here to talk about Eberron, and we're celebrating the lore of Eberron. I think at this point we all know how Eberron came to be. Keith, you had submitted Thrilling Tales of Swords and Sorcery, which ended up getting picked up by Wizards of the Coast during their setting search. Bill, Keith, would you wax poetic a little bit about why it was you both feel that Eberron was the one that was selected out of all of those 11,000 some odd submissions?
Well, to start from my perspective on it, I had been working for 3 years. I worked a lot in the video game industry before becoming a freelance, primarily a freelance RPG writer. And so I was working as lead designer on a game called Lost Continents that was essentially a pulp-themed MMORPG, very much in the sort of Tomb Raider, Uncharted, that kind of vibe. And it became clear to me it just wasn't going to happen. It was going to get canceled. And so I actually quit to try and be a full-time freelance writer. And at that point, Wizards happens to say, hey, we're looking for submissions for new worlds. And so I submitted 7 different ideas, and the 7th one was, I'm like, wow, I've watched so much pulp, I love film noir, I love the idea of arcane magic as a sort of science, and so I just wrote it for fun, basically. I didn't actually think we'd get picked up, and as we said, the name didn't even have a name for the world when I submitted the one-page setting. It was Thrilling Tales of Swords and Sorcery. And so I just sort of pitched this idea of Crazy Pulp Eberron, and...
So I remember when Mary Elizabeth had the hand cart come in with a stack of folders, they were binders, as tall as she was, that had the 11,000 entries, all one-pages. And I got my pile. We got about 3,000 each to review. And we were supposed to bring them back, our favorites, and then we were going to argue about which one to get. I was going through them, and there was Ice Worlds, because Game of Thrones had just come out and was popular. There was Worlds Without Elves, Worlds Without Dragons. How can I have a Dungeons & Dragons game without dragons, right?
It would just be called Dungeons and.
I was getting a little frustrated and figuring, we're not going to find anything. And then I came across Thrilling Tales of Sword and Sorcery. It was not ready for prime time, but it inspired me to say, hey, what if we did this seriously? Because Keith's proposal was kind of tongue-in-cheek.
Absolutely.
And I said, what if we did a serious pulp, noir, D&D world? And that's what, I saw a nugget that I could help grow into our next campaign setting, and that's what I pitched to the team, and that's what I got through the system, and then we all got together and started building the game. So.
Yeah, it was definitely for me the moment in which I got the call saying, you've been chosen to move on to the next stage of the fantasy setting search. And I was like, oh, wow, they picked that. And then it was like, the next step is making a 10-page description of it. And I was like, okay, how does this actually work? So yeah.
I do want to ask Imogen, who didn't start working on Eberron in an official capacity whatsoever until much later. Imogen, as a fan, what brought you to the setting?
Yeah, I think the very first thing I remember from very, very early Eberron was the Across Eberron booklet that was being previewed on the Wizards.com website at the time. And that just kind of, I don't know, it lit a spark in my brain. I thought, I never got to see a paper copy of that because being over in the UK, it was kind of never available. I was probably too young as well to go doing out the con scene as well at 17. But that kind of, the travel log in that kind of really drew me in, and all the concept art done by Steve Prescott, which was also incredible.
Yeah. Prescott.
Yeah. But then, of course, there was the very early fan scene at the time. So joining the boards, the community boards on Wizards.com, which became ZeniMax for a while. I don't know, there was a lot of excitement and content creation and discussion going along the fans at that time that was very exciting. And I did a whole bunch of homebrew, especially monsters. I did like a Monster of the Week series, which became the Eberron Bestiary, which became a fan site, which made me link with more fan sites, which eventually led to starting, like fan things like the Eberron Discord, which I run with Rebecca. So it really just kind of, it's this exponential growth of just exciting ideas, I think, and community that really has driven the love of Eberron, I think.
That is wonderful. I want to ask, just kind of going down our table here, do you have a favorite piece of lore or core concept, NPC, whatever it is, within Eberron that inspires you or just makes you happy?
I will say, just completely randomly out of the blue, it's got to be the grist mills of Droam, which is that how they feed their partially carnivorous population is Soylent Troll. And to me, it's just sort of a glimpse of the whole concept of Eberron, which is in some ways taking things that exist in D&D and that have always existed in D&D, like trolls being able to cut their arm off and have it grow back, and say, well, why wouldn't people eat them? You know, why don't you come up with a concept of just like taking things a step farther or asking questions?
It's so gross.
Just something that Keith just said, that was a key design concept, was to make sure there was a place for everything that was Dungeons and Dragons in Eberron, even if it wasn't the same as it was elsewhere. That was one of our key goals. For me, I mean, I love the whole pulp, noir feel. I run a lot of adventures with Eberron because of that. But to me, the thing that always sticks out, and I've got a whole collection of all of our minis, are the Warforged. I'm just a big fan of what we did with the Warforged and how they came together.
It is also just the coolest to have a Warforged Titan, like, yeah, right there, and just being like, wow.
It's hard to pick because I love so many things about Eberron, but the place in Eberron that my imagination goes back to most often is the city of Sharn. I am such a fan not only of noir, but also of urban fantasy. And so being able to have essentially fantasy Blade Runner is always just so delicious to me. And so often my imagination is on a rain-drenched airship deck as it is soaring among the towers of Sharn.
I think for me, and it's funny you use the word inspired there, Rebecca. I think that was probably on purpose.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts of the setting is Riedra and Salona in general is taking psionics and applying Eberron's wide magic feel to the psionics there. And I just love Riedra as a place to run kind of dystopia and psychological horror kind of thing. A place to really find heroes where the odds are so stacked against them that even most of the villains think they're heroes, and for a lot of the time they're probably right, until you get to the upper echelon and realize it's all based on a lie. But yeah, I mean, I wrote an adventure called Escape from Riedra, which was all exploring some of my favorite parts of that.
Which everyone in this room should open up DM's Guild right now and buy.
Otherwise, we're not unlocking the door.
What do you guys think is the most important thing to keep in mind about Eberron as it's been developed over the years lore-wise? We'll get to more developing Eberron stuff a little bit later, but what's something that you always keep in mind when you're writing or planning a game, et cetera, when it comes to Eberron lore?
I say go backwards here, just to mix it
I
up.
get to start this time. Ooh. That probably means I get to do the easy one, which is, I mean, the first place I always start when thinking about Eberron stories is, you have to decide the story you want to tell interacts with the last war, right? Because that's just so critical to the story of the setting. Even if you don't want to do a wartime story, it sets the stage for everything else. Even if you want to run, like I do so often, something to do with the inspired, that's they're coming into Crawford on the back of the last war. If you want to run a game in Karnath, you've got to know what a country run on martial law after 100 years of war is like, and how that feeds into the undead stories. If it's Breland, it's were they about to win, and what does that do to the national psyche? So for me, it always comes down to the last war, and if you really want to take a story and make it Eberron, that's almost the first question to ask. What do your NPCs think about the last war? What were your player characters doing in the last war? And how does the story you're going to tell change the direction of the next war?
I agree 1,000%. That is exactly why when we were looking for a title for the 5th edition version of the campaign setting, that we chose Rising from the Last War, because we felt that the entire setting was in the shadow of that war. And because I don't want to just give the exact same answer, one of the bits I would zoom in on that is another element whenever working in Eberron is, of course, to think about that wide magic, all of that magic-fueled technology, but not only to include it as a fun aesthetic part of the setting, but also to delve into the complex relationship the people of Eberron have with their magic. Because even though that magic gives everyone amazing conveniences that people in other D&D worlds usually don't have, it's also exactly that magic that wiped out an entire nation. And so to me, it is sort of exploring that relationship with the magic and the magic-fueled technology that is so critical, that then also is a huge part of the story of the Warforged.
Yeah, interesting note about all of that. We built the whole idea of the last war and obviously the next war to come. We modeled that a lot after World War I, going into World War II, and tried to set up that same kind of dynamic in our world when we built it. Yeah, that's all good stuff for me. So the last time I did a new Eberron thing was for cons last year. I created an adventure called Only Murders in the Tower, Only Murders in the Tower, using Sharn, and also my love of inquisitives, the whole idea of the detective, the magical detective in a D&D world. So that's kind of where I begin a lot of stuff, because I think that's a good hook, the whole inquisitive, especially in a place like Sharn, which is kind of built over my growing up in New York. We kind of modeled what would New York look like in a fantasy medieval world, and yeah, that's what I think about.
For me, I mean, it's all of that, and it ultimately comes down to the basic question of, if I'm starting an adventure, if I'm starting something else, my basic first question is, how is this different because it's in Eberron? How is this not, what is going to make the player realize, oh, this is Eberron, this isn't just Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms. And, so often that is the wide magic is sort of the key, is how are people doing things in the world that they're going to stumble across, that just, it's just something in the fact that in the tavern, the, bartender is going to chill your drink with prestidigitation, and that you'll have a halfling on a stool back there. And the other thing I do like to do is also say, what are the sort of touchstones that do relate back to our world? And part of the point is, we didn't want anything in the setting to just directly be, we've dropped Egypt, into the world, but at the same time, part of what makes things feel real is because we recognize things like Bill was saying, that the last war has aspects of World War I, but also with the mourning aspects of the end of World War II. That with the dragon-marked houses, we get some of that flavor of growing corporate power. That, there are these things that we're like, again, it's not the same, but it feels like, it connects to something that we can relate to. And so I'm always looking for that, is what is the thing that is going to resonate with our lives?
To slightly switch gears, I think one of the most impressive things about Eberron, when you open up an Eberron book, you are always affronted with gorgeous and amazing art. And I'd just like to take a moment to celebrate the art of Eberron. Jeremy, you talked before about the art commissioning process and how what was done in 3.5 had really changed how it was done with Wizards of the Coast from then on. wax poetic about that for us. Just what is the process, and why is the art so good?
Now, would you like to hear about currently, or first go back to when
Let's go
Eberron?
back
Well,
then come forward.
Let's start with Bill then, and then I can talk about what's going on today.
So as you said, when we were doing 3rd edition, we worked with Todd Lockwood and Sam Wood, the artists, to redefine what D&D art looked like. And the idea was we wanted it to be practical. We didn't want women in bikini chainmail and anything like that. I even put boots on the halflings because they had to go through a dungeon. Well, who would want to walk in a dungeon in their bare feet, right? And everybody carried all their stuff on them. So we began to think of the world as a real place, and the art should reflect that. When we got to Eberron, we just continued that model. We worked with our concept artists, Prescott and Tadine, and I can't remember everybody's names.
It's been a while. I remember Prescott, so
Okay. Anyway, no offense to that, but I can't. I'll look at it.
It's been
later.
20 years. Sorry.
And we gave them stuff to draw, but we also sat in the room with them and we talked about concepts and ideas, and that's where the lightning rail came out of, and the air sleds, and it was just a very, very collaborative process, and we let the artists actually lead as opposed to just telling them what to draw.
I think a point of that really resonates to me, and just sort of showing how a lot of things in the world really evolved from those sort of ideas, is taking the Warforged in particular. That's Steve Prescott trying out designs and such. And one of the things is just the classic Warforged image of the Warforged standing there that you see in the player's handbook. He's got a little sort of keyhole in the middle of his chest. And I don't believe that was something we told him to include, but instead, the whole idea of the docents sort of evolved because we're basically like, well, clearly that's a socket for something.
Yeah, when we were writing, we would have the new art sketches in front of us, and I'd be looking at them, and let's add
Yeah,
that.
exactly. And that's what I'm saying, is it was sort of inspiring. It was concept art, and, so we had concepts.
And I think that groundedness of the Eberron art has definitely stuck with us. You can actually look back at D&D art from Eberron and going forward, and that sense of what you talked about, Bill, of like it being a real place, it still informs today how we think of the fantasy art that we're creating, not just for Eberron, but for all D&D worlds. I also have been delighted over the last few years to witness us returning to that model that was used for Eberron, and that is letting the artists often lead the way. And you can see in the new core books that are coming out now a lot of gorgeous images where we actually ask the artists to just give us their best shot. And so there are a lot of things there that the artists brought to the creative table. And then, Bill, just like you, we would be looking at this amazing art and we're like, all right, now we're going to make words that reflect these amazing things that the talented artists created. And there are so many other ways that, like when in our panel at Gen Con on Eberron, I talked about how Eberron actually continues to affect not only our work on that setting, but our work on every setting. But maybe we can talk more about that later in this
We'll talk about that here in a second.
Yeah.
Really quickly, do you guys have a favorite piece of art that has come out of Eberron?
I love all of Wayne's covers. Like all the covers are just fantastic. I love in particular like the dragon marked one, because you really get sort of the flavor of each house through these characters. But if I had to pick like just one single image, that jumps out at me. It is the image that was made for 4th edition that we ended up using as the cover for the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron. And it is a warforged hanging on a rope ladder off of an airship, about to either jump down on or having just escaped from a lightning rail. And it is just, to me, like everything Eberron all in there. Warforged, airship, lightning rail, and you have the sense that, oh, this is going to be dramatic. He's going to jump down there. Like, it just captures the whole mood of it in this one shot.
Yeah, I love a lot of the art, from the concepts to the drawing, the pen and ink drawings, all of that stuff. And obviously Wayne Reynolds' art is great. I have his piece that is the Knowles on the air sleds over over Sharn in the big fight, which came out of a playtest that I was running, and I had these little clear discs for my Star Wars figures, and I used them with the Knowles, and that's how we came up with that, and we added it to one of the first adventures, and he drew that piece of art, and I've got it hanging up, so I guess that's my favorite.
And it is such an, again, compelling piece of art because it's that Sharn and it's, action. It's, again, fantastic.
Hard to pick just one, but one of my favorites is actually in this scroll that is going by, and it is one of the pieces that we commissioned for Eberron Rising from the Last War that shows the battle inside a car on the lightning rail, that shows the monk battling Emerald Claw agents, and again, it just oozes Eberron through and through, where you see that mix of the modern with the classically D&D.
I think for me, I will agree with pretty much what everyone else has picked as well, particularly the Wayne Reynolds covers. But there are a few landscapes in there that I think really sell the wonder of some of Eberron's places. I'm thinking in particular of one I think was in the original 3.5 campaign setting, which I think is also on this deck going around.
I tried to make sure that I got a bunch of the really good ones in this, and a couple of the not so good ones.
Yeah, the one I'm thinking of is the one with the two people in the lower district of Sharn looking up at the towers, which gives you a really good sense of both kind of the verticality of the city, but also the lowest parts of it are not really very nice places to be. So that one always sticks for me. And then there's another one that comes from Secrets of Salona, I think, which I'm keeping on brand here, which is Riedran Village. Looks very peaceful. Everyone's in,
There's
my
favorite one. Yep.
There's
there it goes. But yeah, in the Radiant one, the one where you get this kind of village scenery, but in the distance, that sinister egg-shaped monolith in the background just kind of evokes that, oh, what's going on here?
I want to be clear, I did not talk to any of them before putting these slides together. They just happen to be some of the best pieces of art. Let's go ahead and move on to celebrating continued success of Eberron. It has existed for 20 years. Woo! In June next year, Eberron can legally drink. So I would like to know what makes Eberron something that people are just drawn to again and again. Bill, I'd like to hear your opinion on this as somebody who has very much moved on from Eberron, but you continue to play it. It's something that you seem to enjoy at the very least.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So after working on the original book and then a few of the supplements and the adventures, I moved on to other things. Other people took over working on the line, which is the way we did things back in those days. And then I left the company, obviously. I think some of the things about Eberron is that we did strive to make something that was unique. It's different than any of the other campaign settings we've done. That was another one of the goals I had. I didn't want another clone of the Realms or Greyhawk or Dragonlance, which in many ways are all the same thing. Nothing derogatory there, just that they are shades of the same color. I wanted Eberron to be more like Ravenloft or Planescape in that it was different. And I think we succeeded. And I think that's why it continues to resonate. And it's just full of adventure, you know, from the opening of the original book, 10 Things You Need to Know About Eberron, to, you know, you could hear the Indiana Jones music playing in your head as you run the game. At least I can. And
because we're old.
yeah, and I'm older than most. So I think that to me is one of the reasons it's still vibrant. It's different, it's exciting, it's fun.
Jeremy, what about you?
So we have found each time we return to Eberron that there is always a hungry audience for it. I think exactly because of the reasons you mentioned, Bill, that it is in the D&D multiverse, a very special world. None of our other settings feel quite like Eberron. And Eberron has given so much to the rest of the game. One example is the Artificer class. Eberron, yeah. I love the class so much that right after this, next door, I'll be in a live play game playing an Artificer. That class alone is an example of the inspiration that this world has brought to the game. And we found that when we released Eberron Rising from the Last War, that hunger for Eberron was there, and thanks to the fact that 5th edition has reached so many new people, what that has also then meant is that Eberron has reached so many new people. And so it's thrilling to see that this world 20 years later is continuing to resonate with people.
Talking about Eberron in 5th edition, at Gen Con I asked you this question, and I'm going to ask it again. Is there anything else you can reveal about Eberron's future in 2024?
Or maybe even 2025?
Well, in the 2024 re-release of 5th edition. You've only got a couple weeks left.
So I of course can't talk about anything that we haven't announced yet, but what I can say is that we are committed to returning to our most beloved worlds. And I did just talk about how Eberron is a beloved world. And I also mentioned at Gen Con, and I'll say again here, that we definitely have more fun in store for the Artificer.
Good. Thank you for indulging me there. A little bit of bullying for you. Now, I do want to talk with Keith and Imogen specifically about DM's Guild. In our scroll, if they decide to put it up, I do have a wonderful handful of DM's Guild titles written by Keith, Imogen, a handful of people that I know that are in our crowd today.
Hey, everyone who's got something up on the DM's Guild, raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
Excellent.
What do you, hold on, let me read the words that I actually wrote here. What inspires you to continue to write for Eberron on DM's Guild? And what role do you feel like DM's Guild has in Eberron's continued support?
I mean, for me, it was tremendously thrilling when Wizards decided to unlock Eberron in the DM's Guild, in part because it has been an opportunity to focus on smaller aspects of Eberron that simply there was never room to address in the core books. For me, looking to exploring Eberron in particular was the first book I made for the DM's Guild, and most of what it is these are things I love in Eberron that we never had a chance to dig deeper into. The planes are a perfect example where I love Eberron has this unique cosmology, and we've got all these different ideas, and I always wanted, in third, I was always like, oh, can we do a Planes of Eberron? How about a Planes of Eberron? And it just never happened. And so the chance to actually write about that, The Thunder Sea was a thing that in the original setting Bible we created, it included like maps of aquatic nations, and the Sahuagin has a bigger role. And again, at the time it was just like, there's only so much you can cram into a book, and who really needs to go underwater anyway? And so, again, the DMs Guild giving both me an opportunity to revisit that, but also just the fact that anybody can create content for the DMs Guild, covering either small specific things, just covering things. I mean, there's been great content made for Sarlona, from Escape from Rydra to the books on Sirkarn, Adar, and again, it's just great. There's only so much a few people can do, and it's great that now so many other people have stepped in to create really compelling content.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is that DMs Guild works as a really great focus for the community and as a stage for the community's projects. So, I mean, I'm thinking back to the fandom of 20 years ago now, you know, back before Web 2.0 and things. Wow, I guess it was kind of Web 1.5 at the moment, but where
I still play Web 1.0. I really think it's a better system. OSW.
Yeah, but I think the great success of the DMs Guild is that you can put something on there and it will go in front of a whole bunch of interested people. So it's kind of got a built-in audience, and because of that, you get a lot of momentum behind the community who then wants to create for it because it's exciting to put something on there, right? So then you start building, you know, in places like Discord server, you get people connecting saying, I want to explore something about, I don't know, Cree or something, you know, something really niche. But there's a place to put that when it's done. You can put a bit of a shine on it, or even just kind of put it up as it is. And you know that there are going to be people who see it, who are wanting to see it, who are looking for it. And yeah, as I said, it just kind of snowballs into this really supportive environment.
I've talked to a couple of the people on who work on the back end of DMs Guild, who, because I was looking for some stats on how many Eberron products have like bestseller golds and things like that, and we don't have the most titles on DMs Guild, but we do have the most bestsellers out of most of the settings, which is very nice.
Well done, community.
I will say another thing that does strike me, and to which I am grateful to both Bill and Jeremy, is that part of the philosophy we've always taken with Eberron is that canon is a place to begin, but you should always make it your own. And that comes out in points like the fact that over 20 years, we have never locked down a canon answer to the morning, because that's something for you to decide. And to me, that's something that makes Eberron especially good with the DMs Guild, because we're really saying, if you want to do something like make an Eberron version of Star Wars, you go ahead, you know, try that out. And that there's a lot of freedom for people to explore their own direction with the core concepts.
Yeah, in my Eberron is one of the most powerful statements I think that a person can make when even just talking in online spaces, which is another thing that I wouldn't mind to pick your brain about, Imogen, as someone who has moderated so many Eberron online spaces, from, like you said, Web 2.0 to the Discord, the subreddit. How do you feel like the community has always supported Eberron, and what has that always looked like as someone who is like an OG fan?
OG fan. Yeah, I don't know. It's like, as I was saying, there's always an excitement about new ideas and trying new things. And I think it really is to the credit of sort of the core theming that was built into Eberron right at the start. You know, this list of 10 things about Eberron: the wide magic, the last war, the dragon mark houses, if it's an Eberron, there's a place for it, these kinds of things, mean that even if you don't know every bit of lore, every district in Shan City of Towers for 3rd edition, you can build something that very much feels like Eberron, even if you are new to the community. So you can jump into Reddit or Discord or the old boards from 2000X, and you can say, I'm doing a campaign in this. Someone is able to just jump in there and say, oh, a little bit about that was written in Shan City of Towers or Five Nations or the Forge of War, but you never really have to feel like that's the be-all and end-all of what the setting is. And it just lowers the barrier to entry for the community so much that, yeah, it's just easy to get people excited and writing about new things. And I think that shows in the community.
Bill, what is something you'd like to see in Eberron's future?
A movie and a TV show.
Yeah!
But we've got that. It's called Arcane.
Yeah.
Jeremy, I'd love to ask you the same thing. You know, pie in the sky. What would be one thing that you, if you had all the power in the world, you'd love to see happen for Eberron?
I can't actually say. Because anything I would say could be a potential hint at what might actually be happening.
Keith, what about you?
Because he does have all the power in the world.
Ooh.
I mean, no joke. I would love to see, you know, obviously a TV show would be amazing. I'd love to see another Eberron video game, you know, if the chance comes out. I've already said, people have asked, like, what would be the game you want? I want a version of Disco Elysium set in Sharn. I want, like, an inquisitive story. But also, I'm just super excited to see what happens next with the DMs Guild. I do have, I'll say here for folks, I wasn't sure what I was doing after Frontiers of Eberron, but I have decided I am going to be working on another book for the DMs Guild for 2025 through Twogether Studios, and we will talk about that more next year.
Imogen?
Well, people have said the obvious ones of, what was it, TV shows, video games. So maybe I'll throw in an oddball Magic the Gatherings there. Ooh. That'd be nice.
So we've got a little less than 20 minutes here. We will go ahead and start taking some questions. We've got 2 microphones. Please stand in orderly lines behind it. I've got a couple of provisions for your questions here, folks. Who, what, why, and how is how your sentences should start. Please keep it short and to the point. Otherwise, if you've got a longer question, we do have the Eberron Discord, the Eberron subreddit, Blue Sky, and sometimes Keith does Q&As on his Patreon. You only have to pay him a couple of dollars a month, and you should do that. You should support him.
And you get a chance to play in one of my Eberron games.
Yes. So I believe I saw you start here, so please go ahead.
Is this on? Okay, cool. Hi. My question is, so over the past 20 years, Eberron started as an independent crystal sphere that was locked off from the rest of the multiverse. How in 2024, with Eye of Vecna going to Eberron and things like that, do you interpret Eberron now? Is it still disconnected from the rest of the multiverse, or is it now more included?
Do you want to take that, Jeremy, or you want me to handle it?
Well, let's do it together. So, but before we released Eberron Rising from the Last War, and in fact, before any word for that book was written, Keith and I met at Gen Con years ago, and we began talking about Eberron, and we began talking about this very question, because in 5e, right from its launch, We really embraced the multiverse as the setting of D&D, this wondrous place that contains all of these different worlds. And when we returned to Eberron, we wanted there to be a way for Eberron to be connected to the multiverse without in any way undermining its special identity. And so we began hatching this idea that you can now find in Rising from the Last War, that when it was created in this, like a container, so it is inside the multiverse. And then we began exploring this notion that it's starting to crack, and that a DM is free even to interpret perhaps the shards of Sivis that are falling down as results of the cracking in the very reality of Eberron, and that the magic elsewhere in the multiverse is now able to reach into Eberron because of that crack.
And to me, I mean, what that hits in a couple different ways is, again, it comes back to that point we've said, it's the in my Eberron. It's up to you. It's up to you to decide, is the barrier mostly intact and there's just been a couple little things? Has it cracked further and you can really have, active traffic? But furthermore, what makes that compelling to me, hitting the point Jeremy's saying, is it's not just that it's always been free-flowing, it's that it's happening now. And that is a chance for you to make stories of what happens when a spelljammer suddenly comes crashing in. What happens, I'm in a live play right now with Ed Greenwood as Elminster, Luke Gygax as Melf, and part of the point is what happens when Merrick suddenly finds himself in Sigil, for the first time. And so it can be fun to not just say, oh yeah, they're all there, but to actually explore what happens when those things come together.
And when the two of us were first talking about this, it was very important to not, just like with the morning, not say too much about it, because part of the wonder of Eberron is the sort of pun intended, the fog of war, since the morning itself has this fog, but there is sort of a fog of war over the whole setting that gives total freedom to the dungeon master to decide how is everything actually unfolding in your own version of the world. And I know I have been using a version of Eberron where that crack is getting dangerously large, and it has implications both for the setting, but also for other worlds in the multiverse.
Thank you so much.
Over here, please.
If the reset button were hit and you had to start all over, but you had all the knowledge and skills you've now learned after so many years with Eberron, what, if anything, would you change, adapt, or add to a brand new Eberron?
If I can start on that, to me, the couple things I would change would mainly be, like if we go back to the Eberron campaign setting book, the ideas. I still love, there's just a couple things where I just change the scale. I would make the map a little smaller, and I would make the history timeline, chop that in 3. Part of the point is that when I actually submitted the setting, there were a lot more countries, and we cut the countries down because there were too many. You were never going to actually deal with them in an interesting way. And to me, that's a little bit of Galifar having 1,000 years of history, is it's got 1,000 years of history, and we really know almost nothing that happened there. And I feel like 300 years of history would be a little more sort of manageable. We could put some bigger things in there. But, that's basically it.
I like the original book.
1,000 years.
So do I.
But things like the history and stuff, what I was trying to do with that book, working with Keith and James and Chris, was making sure that we weren't talking about the history. We wanted to know what was going on now that you could use now in your game.
And I 100% support that.
And I guess that, yes, it's 20 years later. I'm better at a lot of things now. I could write that better than we did last time, maybe a little bit, but I think it still holds up. I was looking at it just before coming out here, and it still reads really well to me, so I wouldn't change too much.
I think I should go back and say, actually, no, completely agree. I would just take out my use of semicolons as much. I try to cut down on the semicolons. I know better now.
I usually took them out, didn't I?
Yeah. But I'm saying that's on me, I could do better.
Would you like to hear from the rest of us?
I would love to. That's for everyone.
If we were relaunching the campaign setting, like you, I love the setting the way it is, but one thing I would love to see is the dragon-marked houses integrated just a bit more into the fabric of the setting, because I love the Five Nations, and then I love the dragon-marked houses, but I've always felt that the two are not as integrated as I would love to see them.
Just reflecting on that, has two trains of thought. The one is, of course, that's something we talked about. It's one of the things I really like about the 4th edition campaign guide, is the 4th edition campaign guide called out a little more the role of the dragon-marked houses, and also, just within the one book, because we'd had more time, it was drawing on all the other content, a little more of the idea of the scars of the last war, which, of course, we picked up even more so in Rising from the Last War. But I also do remember having a discussion with you specifically about whether to get rid of the moons and only have one moon. And we had a debate. We were like, do you really need 12 moons? And I'm like, we need to keep the 12 moons. That's because of the art, like how it was impacting.
Yeah, well, that conversation that you and I had is a conversation I have about any world we create for D&D, because I am, despite working on the game for years, I'm a DM at heart. And I'm always thinking about DMs and players and their experience at the table. And anytime we as designers put an odd number of suns or moons in the sky, we are basically placing this pit trap in front of the DM, who will be giving this beautiful description to their players, only to have one of them say, "You said the wrong number of moons."
You can't see them all at the same time.
Yeah,
That's true.
Imogen, if there was something you would change about Eberron, what would it be?
This seems like a trap.
I'm not saying we're all staring at you.
Yeah. Ooh, from the outside perspective. I don't know. In some ways, I think I'd be working in the margins rather than overhauling anything particularly large.
Semicolons, I get it.
Working on the semicolons. I think there are some places I'd just maybe dial up, turn up some aspects to 11. I think I've said before that I would probably try to play up the corruption arc in Breland a bit stronger. I know Keith, you talked about the Five Nations being the adventuring party, and I think Breland being the rogue didn't quite hit for me until I was more familiar with the system. I think as well I'd like to, I think it would be good to take a look at the Silver Flame and give it a strong, or just kind of play up the ways in which it's its own unique religion without having any touchstones in reality. And I think I would possibly play up some of the theming of Zendrick in terms of the evils of colonialism, although some of that is textual already. So, as I say, I'm playing around in the margins here, but I think those are some things I think I would do.
One person.
Yes.
What's everyone's favorite city in Eberron that isn't Sharn?
Just as we can do that quick.
Really
Grey
quick.
Wall.
I don't remember the city names.
Jeremy.
In 20 years, people.
One in Karnath.
Stormreach.
Imogen?
Fairhaven.
Ooh. Next.
Hi, thanks. Nice meeting you guys. My name's Brendan McInerney. I live here in Philadelphia. For me, one of the most interesting things, or one of the things that got me into D&D outside of these two guys over here, has been the artwork and jumping into a store and looking through the books and being really inspired by all the artwork that you guys have put together and with the teams that you brought together and things like that. I'd be really interested to hear, Jeremy, I think your take, but the rest of the panel as well, on the role of generative AI and what your kind of opinions are on whether that's going to be a tool, powerful tool for creation, whether it's going to be something that you think might be
This is a
it's in your opinion.
very loaded question. I'm going to give my take right now. Generative AI bad. Jeremy, if
Sorry, I
he
didn't mean to put you on the spot.
if you want to, otherwise we can move on to the next question.
Yeah.
I would just say my team's position is that the art in our books is by humans.
Okay, cool.
And I mean, what DMs do for their own home games is up to the DMs, and I think DMs are scrappy and are free to use whatever tools they want. But when it comes to, you know, the work that appears in a published work, I want to see that done by a creative human being.
Nice, cool, great.
My absolute favorite part of the setting is the goblinoids being described as a eusocial species. I love anything alien, even if I deeply disagree with you about how elves' childhoods work. What aspects of the classic D&D species do you find most alien, and how can people roleplay that and like really pump up how different they are from humans?
I'll throw out one real quick, just because I can say it quickly. Elves, I just posted an article a couple weeks ago about trance and the idea of what is elven trance in Eberron, because it doesn't match some of the, you know, the standard lore. What is it? How does that impact elves as a species? And one of the short examples I'll just throw from that was the idea that elves, part of their long lifespans is that actually in trance they are kind of resetting themselves. What they're doing is telling themselves their own story because they are on a level Fae. And that that part of their long lifespan, it's they hit a point and then they basically just maintain their self-image. You could be a really old-looking elf at 150, or you could be a really young-looking elf at 900, because it's the story they tell themselves.
I think you need to be careful with how alien you go, because we as humans can't really figure that out or play it. You know, what does a color purple glowing light really feel like, right? So try to find one little piece, and then the rest of them are the way you build a character, make it different, but they still have to have something that we can relate to, or you can't really run it, I think.
There's a gentleman by the name of Jared Taylor who is very obsessed with Eberron goblins. I highly recommend you search him out. It's very scary.
It's a little disturbing.
Search him out, and he will talk to you for hours about it. Next question, please.
One of the things that hooked me as I grew into D&D and made Eberron like, this is my jam, was it's the morality of it. It hooked me that it was the first book I remember in D&D where it's like, hey, here's a cardinal in the lawful good church that is lawful evil. There's lawful evil angels, and it's the first one that really explored that. Do you think that's like one of the lasting legacies of Eberron, especially now that we're kind of moving into more of an unaligned system with a lot of 5.0?
Jeremy, do you mind?
Yeah, that is one of those things I alluded to earlier in this panel that has continued to affect D&D more broadly. So when Eberron first came out, it was a big deal that there were creatures in it who went against the traditional alignments in D&D, which is why Eberron books needed to tell you that up front. But when we were working on Eberron Rising from the Last War, we realized we don't need to tell you that anymore, because that's now become the norm for D&D itself. And that comes directly from Eberron. It has helped alter our perception of the entire multiverse.
That was very much a design philosophy that I was trying to develop back in those days, that we wanted a vampire who could be good, bad, or indifferent. We wanted a dragon that could be a friend or a foe. And so we tried it with Eberron first because it was brand new and we could do whatever we wanted, and then it went from there. Yeah.
Next question, please.
In your Eberron, what is your reason or theory for what caused the morning?
Prestidigitation cast at 10th level. Keith?
Yeah. No, I can say the whole point to me is there is no one answer, and it's because I will change it depending on the campaign I'm running. And so the point is, I have never had in my mind the answer. And frankly, I've never actually run a game where the characters have found out, because for me, the impact of it, the Cold War, the fear, is actually what drives things. So I've got a short list of six answers. Oh, it could be a Kenneth weapon, it could be an overlord escaping, it could be this. But I don't want one answer, because I might change my mind the next campaign that I run.
Yeah, we made a very conscious effort when we were having those discussions to not suggest what it was at all. We didn't even talk about it really in our group, because we wanted that to be a mystery for either your campaign to solve or just a mystery that stays forever, because we think certain things should be mysterious.
And how I've approached it when I'm DMing is that all of the suggestions that have appeared in books and more, I treat them as they were all a part of it. Because I love imagining it was such a complex chain reaction of terrible events that there literally is no one answer. That there could be people who spent centuries piecing it together and they still would not actually find every single piece of the puzzle.
I do have to throw out one note, which is in my novel, The Gates of Night, it is implied that Leia's parents know the answer, that they talk about it as if they know what caused the mourning. And part of it is you read the meta text of it, what they're actually saying is what caused the mourning was the traveler. And they're basically saying the mourning threw everything into chaos. Clearly, that's the traveler. They didn't mean literally, but they're like, it doesn't matter what the actual cause was, the traveler set it in motion.
I think if I'm going back to some of my old campaigns where I actually have addressed this question with my players, I had the mourning being caused by a Kalashtar cult who were trying to cause the turning of the age by causing the apocalypse. That was quite fun. They were being manipulated by the Lords of Dust, of course, but everyone is.
I do apologize to all of the rest of you standing here. We are at time. However, I'm sure a handful of us would be happy to speak with you outside of the hall. Outside of that, Eberron's 20 years old. Woo! I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming. I would love to thank all of my wonderful panelists. You guys are genuinely amazing people, and have a wonderful rest of your PAX, guys.
Bye, everyone.